All right, guys. So this video is to kind of help you with one of the two processes for acquired immunity. So remember, acquired is what happens over time. So this is something that someone wouldn't be born with. They don't have it initially. It's the reason that, like, if you have a younger sibling or cousin or whatever, they get sick a lot, right, when they're younger, and they recover fairly quickly from it. Whereas when an adult gets sick, it takes a while, but it's much rarer for an adult to get sick. This is why, because they have this built-in immunity that they've already learned over time. So this one's called humoral immunity, and this one should be relatively easy for you guys to pick up because it's basically uses those antigens and antibodies we talked about when covering blood typing. It's the exact same concept here. Just the only difference is obviously it's not going to be an antigen or antibody on your red blood cells, but of anything foreign that comes into your body. So again, remember, a foreign body could be it could be a germ or bacteria or a virus, or it could just be anything that's not yours. So it could be a foreign blood type. It could be if you get an organ transplant, this is the same kind of reaction that your body would have, which is why you get an organ transplant, you need to take certain drugs to keep your body from rejecting it. So the way that this is all going to start is that it's all going to start with what's called an antigen, right? And we know what that is. That's anything that's a protein of any kind. It's got some markers on it. And notice how I have foreign body here. So this could be a germ. This could be a virus. It could really be anything. And then this would come into your body. And also inside your body, you have these what are called naive B cells. So naive B cells, think of them as like little kids. Like they don't know anything yet. They haven't learned anything. And what is all over them are antibodies. But what's unique is their antibodies, or they have antibodies of many different kinds. So like they might have some triangular ones, some circular ones. Remember, these aren't actual shapes. Just the idea is that they have all these different proteins on their surface. So they have thousands and thousands of various antibodies on their surface, and they don't know which ones to use yet. Okay, they need to kind of learn how to fight, and this is why your body takes time to develop an immune system. So what would happen is when this foreign body came into yours, what would happen is your naive B cell would come over and try to attach to it, and you'll notice that there's really a couple antibodies here, like this one or this one, that have a triangular shape that would match. So what would happen is the foreign body would come over, and its triangular shape would match up with that antibody. It would kind of create a match. So what's going to happen at that point is now we're going to rely on another cell. So that cell is what's called a helper T cell. And these guys are going to come up multiple times throughout your immune system. They're one of the most important things in your immune system. They kind of teach your immune system. They're like the educators of your immune system. They initiate a lot of responses. And so what this helper T cell is going to do is just make sure that whatever this naive B cell is attached to is something that is not a part of your body. We want to make sure we're not attacking or rejecting our own cells. But as long as it's not a part of our body, your helper T cell is going to kind of activate the naive B cell. And what it does when it activates it is it basically programs this naive B cell to only work with this antigen. So let's say, for example, that this is an antigen for the flu. That means that before, the naive B cell could work with any antigen that came into your body. It was a generalist. It could work with any of them. Now, basically what would happen is once the helper T cell kind of programs this thing, what it's going to do is it's going to lose all those other antibodies. So now all it has are these specific antibodies that are designed only for the flu. So it is now programmed to deal with only one specific germ, one specific virus, bacteria, whatever. Again, this could be something that's an actual virus or bacteria. It could be anything that is not yours. But the idea is now this naive B cell can do some specific things to fight off the flu. So I'm going to clear this section really quick so that I can do some other stuff. So we're saying that this is programmed specifically for the flu. So if that's the case, the naive B cell can now differentiate or kind of turn into two different cells. Some of them are going to become what are called memory B cells. And these guys we're going to actually talk about a little bit later on. The other thing that they're going to become are what are called plasma B cells. This guy's a little big. But the idea is that this plasma B cell and this memory B cell are going to be made from the naive B cell. And these guys, again, just like before, are programmed to do one thing and one thing only, and that's defeat the flu. They don't work for everything now. They only work for the flu. So this is why when you get a vaccine, this is what you're doing, is you're teaching your body how to fight off something specific. And we'll get to how that works in a second. So let's talk a little bit more about our plasma B cell, because he's what's going to actually fight off the disease. So let's get rid of this guy. Let's clear some space here. And we're going to get rid of this guy for a second and move him into the middle. So our plasma B cell, what he's going to do is release, their sole purpose is to make a ton of antibodies. So again, this is an antibody that we're saying is designed for the flu. And he's just going to make a ton of antibodies. Just literally thousands and thousands and thousands of antibodies. That is the only job of a plasma B cell. And we know from when we talked about the bloodstream that, or the blood, that plasma B, or I'm sorry, antibodies, the sole purpose of an antibody is to attach to an antigen. So this is why when you get a vaccine, whether it's for the flu or for chickenpox, or even let's say you've gotten chickenpox before, right? The reason you don't get it again is because these antibodies are in your system. So what ends up happening is whenever this antigen comes into your system, all of these antibodies just kind of join onto it. So they attach to it, just like we talked about with agglutination with our red blood cells. These guys are all going to attach to it. So this is how eventually, if you got chickenpox for the first time, or mono for the first time, or any sort of disease, the first time dealing with it is always the hardest, because your body has to do this. It has to program the naive B cell. It has to make a bunch of plasma cells, make a bunch of antibodies. All these things take time and have a process, and eventually you defeat it. The way that you actually defeat or get rid of the flu or get rid of mono or get rid of chickenpox is what happens is all these antibodies attach like we just showed here, and you need one more important cell, and that is a macrophage. And what a macrophage is it's essentially a white blood cell. You don't have to worry about the name, just know that it's a white blood cell. And its job is, we learned last class about phagocytosis, basically eating and consuming a cell. These guys just kind of roam around the body, and all they're doing is whenever these antibodies attach, it's like a signal. It's like saying, hey, come over here. And it's calling over the white blood cell to come over. And what it will eventually do is it will eat and engulf the antigen. So it'll eat it basically, and engulf it so that it's no longer an issue. So it will end up eating that foreign body. All right. So this is how eventually you're going to defeat the disease the first time. So if I were to get the flu or the chickenpox or again mono or any really disease that you can pick, the idea is that the way you would defeat it the first time is you would, again, naive B cells would make a bunch of plasma cells, make a bunch of memory cells, and those plasma cells would make antibodies. These guys found right here. And these antibodies are going to attach to antigens and call over, like our enforcer, which is our macrophage. So these guys are going to come around and eat everything. And once they've kind of destroyed all the virus or bacteria in the body, that's when you would defeat it, you would feel better, and you would be considered healthy again and not contagious. So that's how we fight off the disease initially. But what's really important about your humoral response is that you want to be able to fight off against that disease again, right? We want to prevent it from happening in the future. Think about a vaccine, right? Like we've all gotten vaccines for chickenpox or measles or mumps or certain fevers and whooping cough and all sorts of things like that. The idea is that we've never gotten those in the first place, right? It's not like I've never ever had the chickenpox. So why is it that I've never gotten it? Why have I prevented myself from ever getting it? And that's where you have to kind of rely on that memory cell that we talked about before. So let me clear some space again, and we'll talk about the final cell that's going to be really important to us. So we said before that naive B cells they make two things once the helper T cell activates them. They make plasma cells, which we just showed make antibodies to fight off the disease, but they also make memory B cells. And the key here is the word memory. Okay, that's super, super important, because what they do is they remember the disease. So what they have on them are the same antibodies. So on them are those triangles. And again, so when we were doing this example, we've been using it to talk about the flu. So they would be designed to specifically deal with the flu that we talked about. So that way, if the flu ever came into our body again, these antibodies would detect it and deal with it. So again, this would be any sort of disease at all. But what happens is because these guys can detect it in advance, that whole process we talked about at the beginning of making the helper T cell, activating the naive B cell, making plasma cells, making memory B cells, we've done that already. So if you ever were to get the same strain of the flu again, if you were ever to get the exact same strain of a certain virus or bacteria, if you were to get chickenpox, if you were to get mumps or whatever, right? Because you've had the vaccine, you already have this in your system. So all of us, for example, you all are at public schools, you've all been vaccinated. So you all, for example, have in your bodies right now memory B cells dedicated to whooping cough. So if this was a whooping cough antigen, if it came into your body, these memory B cells would instantly recognize it. And that whole immune response that we talked about before, making those antibodies, making those plasma cells, would happen way faster, way, way, way faster. So that way you would never even get the disease in the first place. You would never get sick in the first place. Your body would just deal with it so fast that you would instantaneously basically just not be sick, because the response is so much faster. You can make so many more white blood cells, you can make so many more plasma cells, and you just never get the disease again. So that's what your humoral response is. It's the first time around, you get sick and you kind of learn to fight it by making some different cells. You make those memory B cells, you make those plasma B cells. But once you've kind of learned to fight it the first time, when that antigen comes back, you instantly recognize it because of those memory B cells. You make those antibodies much faster, and you can deal with the disease before it gets the chance to really take over and make you sick. So that's why certain diseases are preventable after you get them the first time. That's why vaccines work. It's all due to this humoral response.